no reason to waste that money on permitting.
J. Paul, you recall that the legislature last year, at the end of last year, passed a bill that provided, had the governor appoint a permit coordinator for large projects. And John Stolp, the governor's water policy advisor, is his appointee for that legislation that did pass. And his job is to ensure that there is streamlining to the point of common sense and make sure that it is as efficient as possible and that the public understands where they can be a constructive part of the permitting process and without undue delay. So I think that there is something, and I will look, I made a note, your call for resolution. We'll take a look at our existing resolutions and see. I know we have something on permitting and streamlining, but we'll take a look with respect to water, and we'll look at other committees as well with similar interests. Other questions? Harry?
Thank you, Chris. I got one question for Kirk and one for Keith. Kirk, on the money allocations for water projects, you have surface and dredging. Now, dredging is just for existing projects where you're increasing water capacity on surface, right? And what are some cases where there's aquifer storage projects?
CWCB has been studying over the years some opportunities to utilize underwater storage in the, primarily it's on the east slope. I know that there's a site in the Salida area that we're looking at providing a grant for that might move forward some storage space underground. And also along the South Platte, I think there's an ideal location. A couple of sites that I remember, Lost Creek is one, Lost Creek Basin over in the South Platte, and Black Squirrel, I think, is another basin on that east slope that they're looking at storing water underground.
There is no existing, or there hasn't been any yet, right? They're just looking at that kind of storage?
Actually, I know Denver Water is putting some water in the ground, and they're going through some processes to figure out if they can make it economical. There are several communities, I think, in the metro area that have been trying to utilize that as well.
Centennial Water and Sand, that's Highlands Ranch, is actively involved in recharge of the deep Denver Basin aquifers.
And then my other question was for Keith on the, when you mentioned EPA, a lot of this regulatory stuff that you're actually funding projects, is that funding for some of these projects caused by needing updates because of EPA regulations? Is that kind of a full circle?
It really is. That's probably a good way to describe that. Most of the projects that come through, some of it's through word of mouth and projects that we see based on working with communities, but most projects come in through the health department because they've got some kind of compliance issue. Maybe a standards issue, it may be ammonia, it may be the whole regulatory field. But that's generally why most projects are coming in through our program is through those sort of compliance issues. And a fair amount of our projects do have cease and desist orders, that they're under the gun. They've got a project that has to be funded and limited funds to do so. That's a real challenge. You look back, I know there was some suggestions back in time, referendum A was put out there, and as maybe a way to get some projects done. We've not seen a lack of funding really slow down projects as much as we've seen some of the other issues. Sometimes it's political will, sometimes it's environmental issues. For example, we funded Rooter Hess Reservoir, a portion of that. They came out and reached out to our board. When they first made the decision to fund that project, it was 20 years from when they decided to start that project to when they broke ground. 20 years before they could break ground when they constantly. So that was sort of the hurdles, the sort of regulatory hurdles, environmental hurdles that they did have to get through just to start building that project. Fortunately, that project was built. And so I had the opportunity, I've got flyers, so they're over here, I forgot to mention that. I also forgot to recognize one of our former board members, Doug Monger, who we can thank for a lot of the very good policies that we have in place, so thank you. And hopefully I answered that question. All right, thank you.
Ricky Santorelli, then Doug, question in the back, and then we'll need to wrap this up.
My question relates to the definition of a public water system. Is that publicly owned? By some regulation definitions, a private for-profit resort is considered to have a public water system. When you're funding a public water system, how do you define that for public?
Yeah, so the easier answer is the system has to have a public water system ID number. And that's issued by the health department. If you've got one, we can fund you, whether you're a private nonprofit or whether you're a governmental agency. What we can't fund is private for-profit entities.
Okay, so a resort would be a private for-profit.
In most cases, yes. Thanks for the question.
Doug Munger?
So two comments. First off, I wanted to correct what Alden said. We really don't have any money in the Ample White Green. Just in case everybody wants to steal it, it's not there. It's not there. And secondly, I wanted to ask Keith, and again, I did sit on the Water and Power Authority for about 10 years, and so my question is, I support the Buy America thing, I really do. But boy, the Davis-Bacon thing, especially in small communities, especially they don't have the ability to even get contractors to bid on projects and get prevailing wages. It's basically a 10% cost to those small communities that already can't support the project that they're doing and the rest. And my question is there any talk out there now with the new administration that there might be some relief on this thing and that we might be backing up a little bit on that? Especially in regards to the size of projects and the rest. For us in rural Colorado, this is just an absolute killer. And the other thing what they did about 7 years ago, the reloan money, then normally in the past that reloan money had not been subject to Davis-Bacon. And then they came back and said, well, if it was originally federal money, and correct me if I'm wrong, they ended up changing it and said even the reloan money now had to be subject to Davis-Bacon. And I talk about changing rules in the middle of the game. So I just wondering if with the new administration we might see something, and again, it's going to have to be Congress-driven, but I just wonder.
Yeah, no, Doug, you're exactly right. As far as your comment and how things work, you phrased that perfectly. To answer the question, we don't know. What we understand, and for the folks that we've reached out to, is that this administration at the federal level is not focused on these programs and these grants at this time. I think there is a hope out there that maybe requirements will slow or maybe could even take a step backwards. It certainly does add cost to the projects. We've seen that, and just so you know, when that came in, Doug was one of our board members at the time. When those requirements came into the program, our board said, hey, how are we going to make this affordable for communities? This is an additional cost. We actually lowered our rates at that time to offset those costs. So our subsidy used to be at 80%. We decreased it to 70%. And our direct loan rates used to be, I think, 3% or $275, and was reduced to 2% directly to offset, because we wanted to make sure that no matter what, if you're coming into the program, that you would still get the financial benefit even with those requirements. But with that said, it's a challenge. And Doug, you described it accurately. I think we continue to see communities that struggle with some of those requirements. Even if they can meet the wage, it's the paperwork and some of those things that I hear a lot of complaints at my level is that, boy, even if we're requiring, it's the filing, the checking, that sort of going back and forth. So I appreciate your comments.
So one quick comment. So I guess the other thing, I guess, concerning too, while I understand, I'm not an EPA fan as well, and we all have concerns of it, but all of these monies are EPA spinoff, and I guess is there any fear in the EPA and from your contacts at EPA that maybe these programs might actually be cut?
I think there is a fear that they could be reduced. I think a cut's unlikely. They've been very well supported at the congressional level. I read an article recently that talked about the cuts from the president's budget, which looked like it could hit as much as 43% of the funds. From what I understand, the 43%, it's really 20% over their overall budget, but they would apply that to only the sort of state and tribal funds, which is about half their budget, so that's where our programs reside on that side, and the cuts would come on the other side of the programs, essentially the administrative side, where they would cut employees, et cetera, and that would be equate to a 43% reduction there. But certainly that is a concern. You hear, as Chris mentioned, a lot of talk of infrastructure, not as much talk on water, and there's certainly mixed messages out there. So it's definitely a concern.
Thank you.
Kimberly, we had a question. Was it Commissioner Justman? Did you have your hand up?
No, it's the
No.
gentleman sitting by, Ray.
Oh, yeah, come on. Wayne?
I'm Eric James from Montezuma County, and the commissioner here just gave me a segue and almost took care of my question here when he brought up EPA. From your presentation, it looks to me like a very high percentage of your federal appropriations or your federal money comes from the EPA, is that correct?
That's correct. So
Like 85–90%.
So about half of our money comes from EPA capitalization grants. The other half comes from reloan dollars, which are recycled. So when you pay us back, we take that money and then send it back out to somebody else to build their project. So it's about 50-50.
Okay. And of course, there's been discussion about possible changes in EPA and, you know, the kind of funding they're gonna have and maybe some changes in their mission a little bit with the anti-regulation philosophy of the new administration. Have you been receiving in the past any significant funding from the Department of Interior or Department of Energy for your types of loans and projects?
I'll answer for us. Yeah, we have not.
The Colorado Water Power Authority, so I'm directing the question.
Yeah, the answer is no. We have not received any funding at the federal level outside of the EPA cap grants.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to need to wrap this up. Please join me in thanking our speakers, all three. I want to move on to our state and federal offices. We start with Senator Gardner's office, and then if Senator Bennett's office got back in, they said they were going to be coming back, so wave if you're here. But go ahead, Betsy.
Where do you want me?
Wherever you've got a microphone.
Thanks. Thanks, Chris, and thank you for having me. I'm Betsy Bear with Senator Gardner's office, and as far as water, I'll be brief.
Betsy, I'm sorry, can you make sure that's on or you're leaning into it?
Check, check. Oh, hot mic. All right, we're good to go, I think. Thank you. So I can do that again if I wasn't loud enough. I'm Betsy Bear with Senator Gardner's office, and thank you for inviting us to be here today. As you know, these are turbulent times in Washington, but things are moving along. And our office has really been following the Colorado Water Plan. We'll continue to keep an eye on that and look at that. Chris, I thought you did a great job, kind of took my presentation on WOTUS and the President Trump rolling back, executive order on rolling back waters of the United States, so I'm not going to belabor things and go through that again. But I do want to talk a little bit here. I know it's not directly about some of the CRAs, the Congressional Review Act, and what's happened through the House and Senate. And as you know, there were 3 rules that were promulgated and then passed, and the Congress used the Congressional Review Act to repeal them. And one was the BLM, and I always get this wrong, Stream Protection Rule. I always want to say Stream Rule Protection Act, but it was the Stream Protection Rule. And as we know, that went through both the House and Senate. Senator Gardner supported that, and President Trump signed that resolution of disapproval. The second that we know is coming is the BLM methane venting and flaring. We won't talk about that, but except to say that our office is still taking comment on that one. And last is BLM Planning 2.0. And I know these aren't specific water issues, but we're very concerned about that issue. And that looks like that has gone through both the House and Senate and will no longer be an issue for us. So Senator Gardner had the chance to talk to both Secretary Zinke and Chow, and we keep hearing a lot of, I think, mixed messages about what's coming in infrastructure. And we were able to articulate and get some kind of assurances from them. One, for that water projects will be included in infrastructure, first of all. And secondly, that rural water projects will have a priority. I know that we've heard sometimes they say California's going to get it all, or it's good luck coming to the trough. Senator Gardner, through both Secretary Zinke and Chow, really addressed our water issues specific to Colorado and felt comfortable knowing that those infrastructure dollars and infrastructure water would be included. So I think that's kind of a good place to stop as far as water goes. You're going to hear from me a few more times over the next few days. So I'm open to take questions if you have any, if that's how you'd want to
Please, go
handle
ahead.
it.
Any questions for Senator Gardner's office? Commissioner?
Just a quick one. Did you say the rural water projects would be addressed or prioritized?
Well, I don't know if we know right now if they'll be prioritized, but they will be addressed. So we're hearing big water projects, and then I think there's been this concern that rural water projects will just not even be addressed. And we were given some assurances that they would be addressed. How that priority is going to take place, I don't know yet.
J. Paul Brown?
Thank you. I read an article that there was a bill passed like in 1996 or something like that, that regulations had to be forwarded to review by the Congress, and if they weren't, by an administration, that the Congress could look at those and repeal those regulations. Do you know anything about that, or where we're going on that? Because there's some regulations that were just passed by the previous administration that I think some of us would like to get rid of.
I won't say that I was still in high school in 1996, Jay Paul, so I'm not 100% sure about that. But what I can do is look into it. The Congressional Review Act that's been being used is a little different because the regulations and the rules that have been created, there's a time frame to look at those. So it sounds like what you're referring to is ones that if it did not go through Congress and it's any rule that has been put into place, then Congress could go back and repeal that because they didn't have a say. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly? Let me look up that because I don't know enough about that to tell you if that's a tool that Congress could use. My guess is if it was, it probably would have been used because CRAs are a little bit different because they salt the earth. Once they're used, those issues cannot come back. And so I think that if there were other tools in the toolbox, Congress would probably be using them, but I won't get ahead of my boss on that. I'll just check on it for you.
J. Paul, I'll say that what you've described sounds a lot like the RAINS Act, and I can't tell you what RAINS stands for. Somebody else can. It passed the House, has not passed the Senate. Last Congress, $100 million, I believe, is the threshold for impact, and then in which case it would have to have congressional approval, any rule or regulation.
Correct. And Senator Gardner has supported that RAINS Act, and I can give you more information if that's specifically what we're talking about. Absolutely.
All right. Commissioner Linke, a question?
Just have one quick question, thank you. In regard to the water projects, you said for rural, what definition of rural are you going to be using when you decide?
Good question. I think we're in a hurry up and wait moment right now, and much like we've heard a lot, we just don't know yet. But I think having Secretary Zinke, who comes from a western state, and having some background in these issues is going to be really good for Colorado. And having good relationships with Senator Gardner previously, we can reach out and our voice will be heard there.
Okay. Thank you, Betsy,
Thank
for joining us. I didn't see, I don't think I saw Senator Bennett's office walk in, so Congressman Tipton's office. Brian?
Regulations from the executive in need
I
of
turned off the
scrutiny.
mic.
Oh,
Sorry, Brian.
regulations from the executive in need of scrutiny. So that's what
Thank you.
Brink stands for.
Thank you.
My name's Brian Weinhardt with Congressman Tipton's office. Again, thank you for giving us a chance to provide a few updates. Wouldn't be Water Committee if I didn't do Water Rights Protection Act. I think everybody's heard this spiel about 800 times, so I'm not going to go into it. Last Congress, we got it through the House via 3 different vehicles. So we had quite a bit of success with that. I'm very confident we'll be able to do so again. Knock on wood. I don't know if this is real wood or not. But hopefully we'll be able to get that through both chambers and sign into law as soon as possible. Just for a quick refresher, it's essentially a prohibition on executive agencies from conditioning permit approvals, renewals, or extensions with the requirement that water rights be signed over to the federal government, or that that party apply for a federal or a water right in the name of the federal government. Was also going to hit on WOTUS a little bit, but that one's already been covered pretty extensively. Another one that is we keep thinking we've got a lot of traction every year, and unfortunately we keep running into a brick wall a little bit, but Good Samaritan legislation, that's definitely a priority. I think every office, both Senate offices and ours, are going to bring that back up. I think we got about 95% of the way there last time. There was just that last little 5% that we had to try and iron out some differences on, but again, fingers crossed, hopefully we've got enough traction to actually get that one through. Based on the presentations, pretty serendipitous on the last one that I wanted to touch on. We've kind of run this through Colorado Water Congress already, but we're looking pretty in-depth at a funding mechanism to apply it to water infrastructure. It's something that the Congressman's already done. Back in the 112th Congress, there was a bill that he ran called the Education and Energy Act. And what that included was a funding mechanism that would take mineral leasing revenues and anything that was above and beyond Treasury budget projections, forecast for a fiscal year, the federal government's share would have gone into a pot to be used for K-12 education. When we tried to pitch the idea, leadership said that's a fantastic idea, and then they promptly stole it and tried to use it for transportation infrastructure. Of course, that didn't go anywhere. With all the conversation going on about water infrastructure, we thought that that was a perfect mechanism to take a look at using for building water storage, conveyance, anything else that that we might identify a significant need for. And obviously, from the previous presentations, it sounds like there's definitely going to be a need for augmenting some of that financing. Just in a nutshell, the Mineral Leasing Act basically divvies up federal mineral leasing revenues 50-50 between the states and the federal government. We don't want to in any way, shape, or form touch that state share. So it would be only coming out of the federal government share. What we would run into by just dipping into that pot would be pay-go issues. If you are negatively impacting the federal budget, you've either got to raise revenues or find or cut expenses elsewhere to offset that. The beauty of this mechanism is that it only utilizes revenues above and beyond what the Treasury already forecasts, so we shouldn't be running into those issues. The downside to doing that is that it would not necessarily be the most consistent funding mechanism. So it wouldn't be something that you would want to do long-term planning based on income, but it would definitely be something that we think could significantly contribute to other funding pots and augment those and alleviate a lot of the burden on some of the local resources or even at the federal level. Just again, providing another revenue stream that very possibly in a fiscal year could amount to tens of millions of dollars. We're trying to get actual numbers from the Treasury and the Congressional Budget Office. We've got an inquiry out to them. If anybody wants to, we kind of did, just for illustration's sake, you can look at DOI's budget justifications, and they've got 5-year outlooks. Those aren't going to be as accurate as the historic numbers that we would get out of Treasury and CBO, but it gives you an idea. You can contrast that with Office of Natural Resource Revenue numbers of what they've actually reported. And I think what we found in the last several years was that there are some where they actually under forecast, so there wouldn't be any revenue generated. But in the years where they overestimated, again, we could be looking at potentially tens of millions of dollars. That's nationwide. It's not like you're going to suddenly get a $50 million flux into the state of Colorado, but every little bit helps. And again, depending on the year, you could be talking about some pretty significant revenues. Anybody have any questions?
Questions for Congressman Tipton's office? All right, Brian, thank you. Appreciate it. Federal agencies, I see the Forest Service. Patty, you want to start out? Do you have anything for water The water world?
I wasn't going to, but since you're talking water, wastewater, I'll just mention that, I've always find something. So since you're talking about water, wastewater, we do have water and wastewater funding money. We usually have about $300 million a year to do direct loans in rural Colorado. The interest rates run between 1.5% and 2.5%, and we can run it out 40 years, amortize out 40 years, and we do not require Davis-Bacon. And so where our focus is rural, a lot of people say, rural development is, we are in the Farm Bill, we talk about this in the Ag Committee, but think about the reason Congress put us in the Farm Bill and tied us is because we are exclusively tied to rural, where we partner with HUD, we partner with EDA. They are very much pulled into the big urban conversations, and we are at lockstep with rural, and everything we do is restricted to rural, so that's kind of why we do that. So we do have funding in water, wastewater. We can't do surface, we can't do reservoirs, we can't do any of that type of thing. It's strictly for small municipalities. And just as an example of rural, we can't touch Grand Junction, Pueblo, or Greeley with our programs, much less the Front Range. We are very small communities, so that's all I have.
Good, thank you. Forest Service, please. And thank you for coming and joining us.
Scott Armstrong with the GMUG here, and I guess the main news is we have a lot of snow in all of our areas up there, and so we appear to have a strong possibility of a great runoff year. As far as any specific projects or anything else, the one that I would like to bring to your attention, I guess, is the Hunter Monument Environmental Impact Statement, which we've been doing that for a very long period of time. It's a reservoir expansion here on the Grand Mesa. It's our hosts, part of one of their projects, and we probably will be releasing the environmental impact statement for that in the next 90 days. So that's a long-awaited project here on the western slope, and I'm really excited to be moving that one forward. And then we'll see what the spring brings for us. And we have Joe here as well.
Thanks. Joe Meyer introduced myself earlier. I'm the district manager for BLM in Southwest Colorado. Maybe just a quick update, because I think some people are still confused on who sits where and does what now, because up until October, I was the district manager for Northwest Colorado. We did a realignment. October 1, Grand Junction field office, where I sat and was part of Northwest, shifted to be part of Southwest Colorado. I went with them to be the district manager in Southwest because Lori Armstrong, who many of you probably worked with over the years, went on to take a job on the regional stagegrounds team. So that district manager spot was vacant. They shifted me down as they moved the office. Barb Sharrow, who also was the field manager in our Uncompadre field office in Montrose, retired in September. Next week we'll be swearing in Greg Larson, who was our planning environmental coordinator in the SILT office. Some of you may have worked with him on the Thompson Divide and Rome Plateau projects. He's going to be my new field manager in Uncompadre. And Dana Wilson, who you may have worked with as well, was in last year for about 5 months as the acting field manager in Montrose, is my new associate district manager for Southwest. So those are kind of all the seat changes and new names and places. But I did bring one issue, water issue I'd like to mention. In September of last year, the Center for Biological Diversity, Living Rivers, and Rocky Mountain Wild filed a 60-day notice of intent to sue BLM and the Fish and Wildlife Service related to depletions in the Colorado River and endangered fish. And looking at the numbers, we were way, way below any of our projected depletions. But just to be safe and to be able to go forward, real soon you'll see us kicking off a new round of consultation with the Fish and Wildlife Service to update those depletion projections, get a fresh consultation with the Fish and Wildlife Service so we don't leave ourselves open in the future for any challenges to that Section 7. So,
Joe, just to follow up on that, that was related to oil and gas permitting, is that correct?
Correct, to water withdrawals related to oil and gas development and their relation to depletions in the Colorado River Basin.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other members of the federal family? We appreciate you coming. Joe, I want to specifically thank you for the the update on the personnel, because we all recognize that we deal with the policies, we worry over the regulations and the legislation, but it's all about the implementation. So we thank you for being here and appreciate the review of changing faces and places in the agency. J. Paul?
Yeah, just, one of the real important parts of water quality and just water overall is a healthy forest. And, how are we coming on getting dead trees out of the forest and just forest management and especially in relation to, the water quality?
Good question. We still have an ongoing spruce beetle epidemic throughout almost all of the Southern Rockies. Most of the places that have spruce, Hinsdale County, Gunnison County, Saguache County especially, and farther south as well, into Rio Grande, the entire Rio Grande National Forest has been heavily impacted. The spruce beetle's been moving basically in a northeasterly pattern up from those southern forests down there. And it's taking all the mature spruce as it comes. And so really, Western Slope is the most impacted place for bark beetles in Colorado right now. The mountain pine beetle epidemic is pretty much over. They've finished the lodgepole pine off over there. And so we're going to probably have this for another 5 to 10 years as far as active beetle activity and then salvage of the spruce that have been killed. And so most of the forests in the Western Slope, especially the Rio Grande and the GMUG, are at 20-plus year highs for salvage timber harvest that's going on. And so we're making a real effort to get as much as we can. And we've been really lucky to have the support of enough budget to boost our timber protection. Montrose Forest Products has been an excellent partner in terms of getting projects done for us and buying our timber sales, and so they're actually really doing well at that right now. So things are good. There's still a lot of issues out there. Talking to some of the commissioners, especially Cindy and Hinsdale County, there's still a lot of issues that they have with different places where there's a lot of dead spruce, different road systems, and so we're going to continue to work on that. Our spruce beetle aspen decline management response project has been going well. We've sold 4 projects out of that now, and we expect to have that in place for, like I said, close to 5 to 10 years. We were talking about Farm Bill earlier. The Farm Bill has insect and disease infestations, a 2014 Farm Bill, and there may be some things for folks to look at for the next round of Farm Bill that would help us on insect and disease. And so as you guys take a look at that, you might look at that section of Farm Bill as well. So I think we're hitting it hard, and we're pretty much at capacity as to what we can do as far as working on that epidemic. And we're going to hit it hard for 4 to 5 years before we start getting to the end of that salvage piece.
Would you follow that up with a quick education for all of us and any assessment you might have on fire borrowing and the end of fire borrowing?
Yes, please. Okay, that's an obscure topic for some, but fire borrowing is basically when we have large wildfires across the country in the Forest Service, and the largest of fires cost hundreds of millions of dollars basically. And it sometimes exhausts our planned budget for that, and so we have to withdraw funds from other accounts like timber and water and other accounts that the Forest Service has. And so on bad years, we lose the opportunity to do some vegetation management, recreation, and other work because of the cost of fires. And so that's been a long-term problem, and there's been attempts to address it over time. And I'm sure the new Congress and others will continue to look at that as a possible different way of doing things that would help us have more dollars available to vegetation work. And I did, it reminds me on Jay Paul's question about water and how it's related to some of these issues we've been having. As if we have large-scale fires in some of these spruce beetle areas, which is a possibility someday we could have, Also, just all the sheer mass of tree mortality, it does change some of the water runoff characteristics. It can be extreme in some areas, can be unnoticeable at other times depending on what happens, but it will possibly affect some of the downstream counties and other things. But in a sense, there could be more runoff than usual because the trees aren't there that once were there, and especially if you have a large fire, there'll be a short-term impact to that. But fire is always a challenge for us, and last year we had a pretty normal fire season, but we still spent an enormous amount of money on it. And we had some fires in Colorado last year that we didn't expect. Even on the western slope we did, but not as many as we have had in past years. But it's been a while since we've had anything in spruce beetle kill. The West Fork complex is one of the ones that people remember. We could see more of those given the right conditions. It's always hard to know how we'll do that. But with all the salvage and things that we're doing, I think we're making some good progress out there.
Thank you. Callie?
Just a real quick question, Scott. So do you have an idea how many acres we're talking that we have actual timber sales on? Not the, I can't remember what they're called. They're not sustainability contracts. What am I? Stewardship contracts.
Right.
What is an S? Thank you.
We have a variety. Yeah, we have a variety of different types of projects going on. So we do have some stewardship projects that are going on, especially on the Uncompahgre Plateau, at least on my unit. We have what are referred to as normal commercial timber sales or salvage sales, and then we have even other types of projects sometimes. So as far as the total acres, if you just look at the GMUG, that's one number, but then if you start looking across all the other forests that are involved, we get up there in the tens of thousands of acres every year that we're working on. Most timber sales are 2,000 to 3,000 acres, and so we have 5 or 6 or 7 of those that go every year. So quite a few different ones that are ongoing. So a lot of acres, but it's nowhere near when you start looking at the full scale of 3 million acres, which is my unit. It takes a long time to get through that, but it's a logistical major deal to do as much as we have. So I think we're doing a lot. It's not, when you start comparing it, 3 million acres to a few thousand, it seems like a small amount, but you go out there on the ground, drive along Highway 149, whatever, and it's a bigger scale than it seems when you just do the math. The visuals are pretty impressive, actually, of how much work's getting done out there.
Are there any state agencies that have been able to join us? We heard from a couple, obviously, as our speakers. Anybody from CPW walk in that I didn't recognize? I'm sorry, Christian,
Yes,
please.
thank you. No, I usually don't ask too many questions. Scott, have you heard, is your branch of the Forest Service or any others that you're aware of testing and researching the use of hemp to clean soils after massive wildfires?
Not that I'm aware of, but we do have a research organization, and it seems as though I might have seen something on an email. I can't remember the specifics of that, but at Rocky Mountain Research Station, I could look into that to see what's going on with that. But it's an interesting idea. Usually we have problems with people trying to grow that on the forest.
It's different than its sister product.
Yeah.
All right, I'd like to move on to our resolutions. They've been handed out. You've got, or they were available for handout there. If you walked in, we have 3 resolutions for consideration, 2 for consideration for readoption, and a new water planning resolution. I will start with Water 12 from 2012, 01. And that's a federal permits opposing the taking of private water rights. You just heard Congressman Tipton's office talk about legislation regarding this. I would characterize this as a resolution in support of that legislation. Any comments, any action? J. Paul Brown.
Mr. Chair, I would move that we readopt WA-12-1.
Thank you. We have a second. Is that Commissioner Linky?
Harry.
Harry? Okay, thank you. Second, Harry. All right, thank you. Any discussion? If not, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That passes unanimously, and Brian, please take that endorsement on to the Congressman. WA 12-2 is a support for the prior appropriations doctrine. This is I think I will suggest continues to be a timely resolution. Any discussion or action? A motion to readopt would be in order. J. Paul Brown?
Mr. Chair, I would move that we readopt that resolution.
Thank you. Second by Commissioner Linky. Discussion, Ricky Santarelli.
Yes, the language talks about spring 2012 meeting. I would suggest we reword that so that it doesn't refer to a specific date and just say that we pledge support for the principal prior appropriation.
Good suggestion, thank you. We'll try to make these timely and timeless as well. I also have a suggestion that in the title, that it may be a little confusing, and I think it's cleaned up easily by striking the word public.
Friendly amendment?
Thank you. J. Paul, may I consider both friendly amendments? Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Linky, both friendly amendments?
Yes, but I'd like to add one other thing.
Yes, please.
And I think this is in light of what I just heard, we could say pledges its continued or continuing support for, just add the word continuing in there, as we struck out the spring 2012.
Good. Any opposition, concerns with that suggestion? Seeing none, we'll include that. If no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the slightly amended resolution and readoption of that resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. That also goes forward to the board with a unanimous recommendation from the Water Committee. The Colorado Water Planning Resolution is a resolution that was initiated by the Tourism Committee. It was also worked with the chairs of the Water Committee and subsequently through the Policy Advisory Committee of the Water Committee. And you see some changes made there that were made in red, that were made by the Tourism Committee at its meeting a week or two ago. Those changes, in fact, reflect the changes that were recommended or suggested by the Water Advisory Committee. So with that, I would open this up for discussion. It is a lengthy resolution. It does have a fair bit of preamble through the whereases. Generally, I would call your attention to the therefore be it resolved, but I think the whereases in this case are important and instructive to staff as well as the membership. Commissioner Linky?
Thank you. I just have one small change in the second whereas. I would like to change the word concern to priority.
The second whereas.
Yeah. Where it says, this is on the red line version, I guess.
Are you on the second resolved?
No.
I'm sorry, I'm not
At
finding
the
it.
top of that page, I'm on the back page here. Where it says, whereas the past four Colorado governors.
The second to last.
Second to last, sorry. Second from the top of that page. Sorry.
Okay.
Just change the words concern to priority.
Okay. Any opposition to that change? Seeing none, we can incorporate that. Any other suggestions, concerns, discussion? Rachel Richards.
Very small, but on the fifth bullet point on the therefore be it resolved, the fourth, I think that the word measurable outcome needs to be plural, outcomes. It sounds like there's going to be one single outcome, and I think that needs to be plural. But that's all. I think this is well drafted. I'd like to congratulate you and the tourism committee on that.
It takes a village. Thank you for that comment, though. We will include that S. Commissioner?
So on the first page, the second big whereas, I'm concerned that the difference between we moved from number 1 to number 5, and whether the 2, 3, and 4 were written in invisible ink that we don't know is there. So we might need to renumber those.
Oh, yeah, yes. Actually, Commissioner, those, I believe, are accurately reflected there, and I'll look to staff to help me with this. These are the numbers. This is not a full recitation of that existing resolution or the 64 water principles. Those are highlighting those water principles, number 1, number 5, and on down.
Okay, thanks.
Is that correct? Yeah, I think I looked at. I had the same thought when I first saw it and went through and verified that was in fact the case. J. Paul?
Mr. Chair, the way I understand it is we're looking at the red portion are amendments to this.
Well, it's a new resolution, so it's all new. The red was added by the tourism committee from the original initial draft.
Okay. I would move that we adopt this resolution as written.
And as discussed.
Yeah, as discussed.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion to adopt WA 14? Shouldn't that be 17? 1?
No, this is from 2014.
Did we come up with this? This was before. Okay, all right. So this is a reconsideration. And all right. So WA 14-2. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Thank you all very much. I don't want to end yet.
I do think that it might deserve a new number. I think that's not something that this committee needs to decide, but because it is referring to something other than what the original referred to.
It will. As the action we've just taken, these will become WA 17-1, 2, and 3. No, they're readoptions of
Because
those.
this is a standing policy that we have, WA 14-2, water planning. We have amended that resolution today.
Okay.
So it is still WA 14-2.
It is still 14-2.
Yes.
All right.
It would be 17-1 if it was a completely new.
But there will be a recognition in the bottom left corner of the policy when it was amended, and there'll be a list of those.
Amended and readopted.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Appreciate that clarification. With the few minutes remaining, and we'll make a smooth transition to the Business Affairs Committee and on time. But I want to ask people, the summer meeting will be held.
So we've changed the location. The first week will be held in Montrose, and that will be July 13th and 14th. We'll have telecom, healthcare, business affairs, transportation, and education in Montrose on the 13th and 14th of July. And then the second week will be held in Summit County and in Edwards, right, Jordan? In Edwards.
Edwards is Eagle.
No.
Yeah.
Or Frisco.
Yeah, Frisco.
I apologize. We'll be in Frisco on July 27th and 28th, and that will be ag, water, tourism, public lands, and natural resources and energy. And that is on our website.
Thank you. And with that, I'd like to ask the membership, are there any specific topics you would like to see us cover? Are there any resolutions that you feel you want to ensure that we have? I will be happy to research something if you suggest it and we think we might have it. We'll make sure that it's still timely and on point. Or any resolutions that you think need to be addressed. I will tell you that during today's discussion, I've made note of 2 Waters of the U.S. and a Forest Health Fire Borrowing as potential resolution topics. Those obviously are topics that we will coordinate or work jointly with other committees. But with that, I want to open it up and ask for your input of what you would like to hear and see at the July meeting. J. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It might be good to have an update on 1256, which is the water storage study on the South Platte.
Yes.
You know, if the Front Range would, if we as Colorado would not waste that water that's going out to the South Platte, we wouldn't have to send so much over from the West Slope.
I believe the report, the legislation that you sponsored and shepherded through the system successfully last year calls for a report to be completed after the July meeting, but we certainly can get an update on that. I believe it's an October or November date that the report is due to the Interim Water Committee. Okay? Barry?
Chris, if it makes sense, a little history lesson might help us at the summer meeting, but they're on these storage projects, I'll use an example, in northwest Colorado, that Save Repository project was actually approved, permitted, and never got funded. And I think there's probably a number of those projects out there, but a little history lesson on how many of them are out there and didn't get to the finish line, and see if there's some life back in some of those.
That's a good suggestion. We certainly can help with that.
I guess I have a suggestion. This is an idea, basically an idea about how the fire affects watersheds and the water downstream flows.
Okay.
Hey, Chris?
Yes, Senator?
Yes, I'm still here. So an idea that I would like to throw out for additional updates is the funding of the state water plan and what ideas are out there, not only from TWCB and the executive branch, but what other entities might be thinking of and how Club 20 might engage in that and spur it along. $20 billion is a pretty big number, and if we're going to make progress, I think we need to start getting pretty strategic about it.
Very good suggestion. Commissioner Linke?
I would like to have a discussion regarding the county's ability to assess impact fees for those counties that are affected by a lot of water diversions.
Okay.
I'll leave this up to the chairman's discretion, but I think that by July, it might be interesting to have a report of some of the actual water production of the various basins, compare it to the estimates and how much water we've got right now. Most of them are very high. The snow-tail reports seem to be very high. If there's anything noteworthy, I think it'd be interesting to hear it. But you decide what's noteworthy.
Thank you.
Chris?
Anybody else? These are all been helpful. Yeah, Carla.
Just throw out a name, the effect of forest fires on water yield in the forest.
Yeah.
There's a retired ranger out of the route forest named Chuck Crum that's done a lot of work on that. Might be a resource person you might want to contact on that.
Thank you. All right, Christian?
Also, I'm not sure if you saw that Noah just walked back in.
No,
Senator Bennett's
I
office.
didn't, thank you. Noah, you have 4.5 minutes at the most.
I don't even need that one.
Thank you for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for your patience.
Senator
Chris, I
Bennett's
appreciate
office.
it. I'm Noah Corver from Senator Bennett's office. Water update, I'll be really brief. It starts with the conversation that we had this morning that I think a lot of you were here for about the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is going to be one of my boss's biggest priorities this year, and there are a lot of opportunities, direct and indirect, to address water issues, particularly as they relate to agriculture, of course, in that bill. And so that's one that we are kind of beginning really early, even though that bill is not going to be necessary until next year. The drafting is going to be starting somewhat soon, and we want to make sure we're having conversations with people really early about it. So we'd be interested in communicating with Club 20 and hearing all of your thoughts about the various programs in the Farm Bill that affect water. One, of course, it's been a really big one for us over the last couple of years, has been the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. There's a really important program going on in the Lower Gunnison River Basin, working with, I'm sure somebody here in this room is working on it. Yeah, right, okay, easy enough. And then we also, right at the end of 2016, we got a really big project funded through the RCPP, the Windy Gap Project up in Grand County. That's one that my boss has been pushing on for 3 or 4 years, working on that one, and $8 million for some really meaningful work up there. Money that will go to support, kind of help some of the ranchers shore up their irrigation work, build a bypass channel around that dam so that you can have higher flows and healthier systems beneath the Windy Gap Reservoir and dam. And we would like to see opportunities to strengthen the RCPP in this Farm Bill, as that one's brought tens of millions of dollars to the Western Slope for water issues. One other issue that's, I guess this is kind of old news at this point, but aquatic nuisance species. I feel like you probably touched on this while I was on. No, okay. So as you may know, we worked with Senator Gardner's office on an aquatic nuisance species provision that would have provided additional funding for Army Corps reservoirs in preventing invasive species like the quagga mussel, zebra mussel, many of which we do not yet have at many of these reservoirs in Colorado. We see it downstream and in a lot of other water systems, and we do not have them up here, and that's incredibly important. An infestation in the wrong part of the system could go all the way down to California, and obviously have some really meaningful impacts here at home. So we had a bill that would have supported, would have increased the funding to address those programs. As you know, the state's been picking up the tab in a lot of cases, and that may not be sustainable, and it shouldn't be the way it is. Unfortunately, and while we got that funding and that bill in WRDA, the Water Resources Development Act, on the Senate side, we were not able to get it included in the House side, and when the bills finally got reconciled and we saw the final version, it wasn't in there. So we are picking up the pieces and trying to see where do we go now, what are the opportunities going to be in this new congressional environment, and that line's probably the right one to close on, right? What are the opportunities going to be? We've got to figure out, I think the last couple of years you saw a lot of issues with California and Arizona having kind of the strongest voices when it came to water issues, and putting out a lot of legislation that we in Colorado had to find a way to make sure that we were getting our piece of the pie out of that, or in some cases push back. It kind of remains to be seen whether that'll be the discussion this year at the federal level or not. We don't know, but we're gonna be there to find out and do what we can.
Thank you, Noah, and respect for our membership and my fellow chair, the next committee. I'm going to cut off questions, encourage you, if you have questions, to follow up with Noah individually, and adjourn the Water Committee meeting with thanks to all of you for your attendance and participation.